Hello and welcome to Simply Tax. This is your host, Damien Martin, and today we're trying something a little bit different. You've seen some video from us on some of our episodes, but we're going to do a full kind of behind the scenes on episode 133 here, which was my most recent conversation with guest Travis Lucas on where things are heading with the Build Back Better agenda and watching it progress through the legislative process. Now, before we get to that conversation, I want to invite you to something else new that we're trying, and that's Simply Tax Talks, which is a new live stream that we're doing on our YouTube channel that'll last for about 30 or so minutes. And we're starting tomorrow, which is Tuesday, October 26, 2021. And it'll start at 10 a.m. Central. And it's your chance to sort of bring your questions and engage with us live. We're going to have guests on from BKD's National Tax Group who will share their insights, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, strategies, things basically that you need to be considering right now, or maybe holding off on considering while we watch all this develop. I mean, it's such an uncertain time, and we thought what better way to help you understand and wrap your head around it than to be able to engage with us live. So we hope you'll join us. Again, 1026 is our first of these, and we're going to do them weekly, sort of until things come to a culmination point. Maybe even after, if we see the enactment, we'll share some of those insights and really break down what it means. So subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. And with that, here's my conversation with Travis. Enjoy. Well, Travis, we're back checking in here. It seems like things have been a little bit quiet in terms of, progress, I guess, or knowing where things are going. So maybe can we just start there and what have we seen and what are you seeing in terms of, how things are shaping up from a package perspective and maybe just a deal perspective?
Yeah, this is our third podcast. We started this back in late July. We did another update in September, and here we are in mid-October. This has really progressed, the budget reconciliation package, and we'll talk about that. The budget reconciliation package, again, that's where all of the domestic spending discussions are happening, all the tax provisions and their discussions are in. And we're going to talk about maybe here in a moment the 4 tectonic plates. We talked back in July about 5. One of those has been taken out because that was the budget resolution that essentially teed up the budget reconciliation bill. So now we've got 4, and they're all interlinked, and then the politics are all interlinked. And let me just set the stage for whether or not the budget reconciliation package gets through, whether the infrastructure package gets through, how they deal with the debt ceiling, and how they deal with the continuing resolution, which is for fiscal year 2022 government spending. The 2022 elections, the general elections, that are about a year out, those weigh heavily upon the minds of all people in Congress, both parties, even if they've got safe districts, not safe districts, swing districts. This is the thing that everybody's really looking at. So from the Democratic perspective, they say, look, we've got to bring home what we've promised, which is a lot of the things that many of us are reading in the papers about the domestic spending programs and changing the tax codes and those things. They know that they have to get those wins. They also know that they've got to get an infrastructure package done, all of these things. But they also know that, and this is Democrats and Republicans, that in some of these swing districts, these things aren't always all that popular. And so you can lose, Democratic majorities pretty easily. The other thing, so that's one thing, the 2022 general elections. The other thing in understanding all of this is really who's against who. So you've got several different parties that are kind of lined up in all these discussions. One, really 2 flavors of Democrats, the moderate Democrats, as they call themselves, and the progressive Democrats. There's about 94 progressive Democrats in that caucus in the House. Generally, they can swing many more votes above that, depending on what the votes are. And then, so you've got those 2 kind of competing, not kind of, but very much competing against one another. And then you also have this whole dynamic that many of you have been reading and watching about, and that's Senator Manchin and Sinema against Senator Sanders and his colleagues in the progressive Democratic caucus, and then of course Republicans. So you really have got four groups that are against each other, trying to figure out what's going to be in this package, and whether it's taxes, whether it's increased Medicare programs or Medicaid expansion, HCBS programs, and things of that nature. So all these things are coming together. And then we've always talked about. I'm really big on this is getting the votes. Remember, generally in the Senate, you need 60 votes to pass any normal bill. With budget reconciliation, you need 50 plus one, which would be the vice president, 218 in the House. So there's a 3-seat delta in the House. So if you lose 3 votes there, you're not going to get anything done. If you can't get 50 votes in the Senate, you're not going to get anything done. And that's really where the fight is. So we've talked about, the House has passed a lot of their agenda, but not over on the Senate because they're trying to figure out their votes. But even more than that, they're trying to figure out what is that overall top line number in budget reconciliation. So, from the Senator Bernie Sanders perspective, they wanted 6 trillion in this bill. And they feel from their perspective, look, we compromised down to 3.5 trillion. But Senators Manchin and Sinema say, look, we've been telling you guys for months and months. In fact, we sent you a letter in July for everybody to read that we're only going to do 1.5. So they're warring between 3.5, 1.5 trillion. So you could probably get a deal of about 2 trillion. Once they figure out that top line number, I think that's when you're really going to then figure out, okay, which programs are going to be in that budget reconciliation bill, and then they'll move to a vote. One other thing is that in negotiations, whether you're negotiating for a house or a big deal like this, whatever negotiation, it's always determined by the deadline. So really these deadlines, whether it's the debt ceiling deadline, which really is December 3rd, especially now, yesterday, the Treasury Secretary said it's December the 3rd. That's the deadline. And then, of course, you've got the continuing resolution. It's got a deadline of December the 3rd and things like that. I think that you'll probably see these negotiations go towards that end rather than earlier. So yes, the speaker and others have said, well, we're going to try to get this infrastructure package done by the end of the month of October. Doesn't look like they've got the votes for it. Maybe they do, but I'm hearing that they don't. And then again with what all goes into the budget reconciliation and things like that.
I like that model and the way you talk about watching the votes and counting the votes and getting to the votes. But it certainly seems like that top line number. There's just been so much conversation around it lately. It almost seems like that's really where things are stuck. So are there maybe some sticking points that maybe are beyond even the top line number that when you look at Senators Manchin or Sinema or others that
Right.
may come up in this kind of delicate balancing act?
I think they'll definitely arrive at a top line number. I think at the end of the day, they're going to figure it out.
Mm.
That's what our listeners need to know. They're going to get a top line number. They're going to figure out what's in there, and they're going to get 50 votes plus the vice president. I really believe the budget reconciliation will happen. I think that there's probably a pretty good chance that the infrastructure package will happen. Now, there's a lot, obviously, between now and the end of the deadlines, early part of December, which they can always move this up for the most part into the second week in December and that type of thing. But I think they're going to arrive at a deal.
Are there any, I guess, potential landmines that in your mind that could be a challenge? For example, I know, like you said, the goal is still, Halloween, try to get things moved forward. And obviously, we had a lot of this conversation at the end of August, and it came
Right.
back again at the end of September with Representative Gottheimer and the groups on the kind of tying the hard infrastructure or the bipartisan piece to the soft piece, reconciliation bill. Are there any challenges there if it does slip into November, December time period, like you're suggesting, for squeezing on one side of the balloon, and that's the other side? Any concerns there with keeping those votes?
Not really. I mean, again, that infrastructure bill vote can more or less take place anytime. I mean,
Okay.
there's some issues with, federal highway funding and that type of thing, but there's workarounds with that. So the infrastructure vote is a floating. I view it as something that's floating. And if you were to talk to people within Congress without the public hearing, they'd tell you that too. And the same with budget. Again, same with budget reconciliation. The big thing, and I've said this before, is that is driving a lot of it is the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling politics is really driving, for the most part, a lot of this. Uh, the budget reconciliation, the infrastructure package, because it's one that the country has to make the decision on. The Congress does. And as I've pointed out, I don't believe that the Republicans in the Senate will agree to helping the Democrats in a 60 vote up or down standalone debt ceiling vote. They're just not going to do it. They did a short term extension for a variety of reasons, political reasons that benefited really the Republicans and also the Democrats. But it really allows the Democrats to do maybe what they don't want to do, but which I think they will do, which is attach the debt ceiling to a budget reconciliation package and pass it with 50-51 votes. Again, we got to look at those deadlines and those things. And I think it could go up, all the way to the end of the deadline.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And does that impact? I guess you're talking about getting to a top line number and then maybe ultimately attaching the debt ceiling to the reconciliation bill. Does that impact the math here and maybe what's possible, what we can do, or how does that look, and why is there maybe some opposition to attaching those two from the Democrats' perspective?
Yeah, there are some sticking points with the infrastructure package and budget reconciliation. Just real quickly, and I think we may have discussed this before. The moderate Democrats want the infrastructure bill to go first, whereas the progressives say, nope, we're not going to do that. At least they're saying that now. We want the budget reconciliation to go first before we do anything. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why they think that, why there's that rationale. So you have that type of chess gamemanship being played. But what are some of the perils
Yeah.
of the Democrats attaching the debt ceiling to budget reconciliation? It's really this. Anytime you do budget reconciliation, especially if you do it with attaching the debt ceiling, it does quite of a significant thing. It's called a votorama. There are several actually, and some people have probably heard that. But essentially, what it does is that it allows, in this case, the Republicans to offer up particular amendments that all senators, including, and this is very important, vulnerable Democratic senators up for election next year, November 2022, to have to vote on. These are really kind of, I'm making this term up, campaign amendments, and they can be embarrassing to a vulnerable candidate. You can just hear the airtime, the commercial. Oh, Senator so and so, she didn't vote for this. Uh, that's actually is running through the minds of the Senate Democratic leadership. They don't want to expose their vulnerable candidates to things like that. They're doing their job. So that's one reason. And the other thing is that in some of these swing districts, of course, this particular spending package is not real popular in these swing Democratic districts. So Democrats hold the district. It's a swing district. It could potentially go south on them, and that type of thing. So it's those types of politics. But again, I think, and I could be wrong. And of course, this is just a guess, but I think that they attach the debt ceiling to the budget reconciliation package regardless of the votorama and regardless of everything else. Because again, I think the overwhelming desire is to get something done from the Democrats' perspective that they can then point to the public and say, we did this and we're proud of that. You see, now, of course, the Republicans are going to say, look what they did. Look at that.
Right.
And,
Right.
that kind of thing. But, that's politics, that's campaigning.
There's obviously this momentum. They're trying to get something done. Like you said, we've gone a ways here since we started having these conversations and check-ins. It was interesting to me when we actually start to see legislative text of what we might actually see in this reconciliation bill come out on September 13th in the House. And so there's definitely been a lot of conversations I know I've been having and a lot of questions I've been getting related to those provisions is, well, do you think this is staying in? Do you think this is going to fall out? Is it going to change? What do you think? So I'll pose that question to you.
Sure.
Looking at what we had there, is that a starting point? Is that maybe likely to what we might see in the bill once they land on a top line number?
Right. And what you're referring to is the September 13th Ways and Means Committee markup, where they essentially passed out of that committee. It's now over the Rules Committee in the US House, all the tax provisions. So everything that relates to individual income tax rates, capital gains, carried interest, estate planning provisions, IRAs, a lot of stuff. That stuff, all of those things were packaged up, passed by the Ways and Means Committee. But remember, on the Senate side, there has been no markup like that. And they don't have to, but it is the basis of what is being contemplated by the Senate over there. Now, remember, the Senate Finance Committee, which in my view is the most powerful committee in the United States Congress, Senate or House. They've got broad jurisdiction and that type of thing. They can take what was over there at Ways and Means and say, yeah, it's a pretty good start, but we're going to add some things. And Senator Chairman Wyden, he's a big thinker. Not just him, but his staff and his colleagues have some different ideas on what should be there. But I'm not privy to what they specifically are wanting to add or delete. Again, I think it really kind of goes back to how many votes they can get around those things, right? Can they get 50 votes in the Senate for it? But I think that the vast majority of things that we all see in the Ways and Means package is what we're likely to see in the final budget reconciliation bill, with some maybe smaller add-ins or subtractions. But that's why it's so important now for everyone out there to begin to wake up, look at what's going on. I would tell people, look at what's in that Ways and Means package. That's not the law yet, but that could be, and start coming up with different permutations to how to react to that. Plan A through Plan, G, and then when it passes, which that could be in December, you're ready to go. Because most of those things, not to get all into it, but most of the provisions have effective dates of January 1st, with exception of, the capital gains rate, which is, you know, probably going to be the date of the enactment and things like that. But plan now. Get with your advisors now, CPAs, financial advisors, good lawyers, and talk about, okay, what if? What do we do?
When you talk about some of these retroactive effective dates, I know that's been a controversial one, especially around the capital gains rate. Do you think it would maybe move from the House one has the September 14th effectively is when the new rate would kick in. Do you think that maybe that moves forward to maybe the date it's introduced or gets over to Senate, or maybe the date of enactment, or what do you think there?
There's nothing that says that it has to be the 14th, or,
Sure.
you know, let's just say mythically, November the 23rd or whatever. Uh, but I would, there's a reason why they do that. It's not to, I believe it's so they don't disturb capital markets and those things, and people can't plan around it. And that type of stuff. So, but I really don't know. I mean, it could be the 13th or the 14th rather of September.
And so I guess with that in mind, it sounds like you're saying, watching the votes, seeing what the top line they land on is, and maybe how some of these conversations progress. But any other things, I guess you would say to keep your eye on right now, because it is so uncertain. And I talk to so many that are, they're business owners, or they're looking to do some investment deals or mergers and acquisitions, and they just have so many questions around what to do. But you said it's uncertain. So what should they be looking for? What should they be watching?
Well, there's a lot to watch, but if I were to watch anything, I'd watch Joe Manchin. Put him on an RSS feed, I suppose. But he's never really wavered. He is going to vote for, I think, a budget reconciliation deal. I think that's just going to be smaller than 3.5. I think it's going to be he's going to compromise, but there's a lot of stuff that he's not going to agree with. He knows that he holds all the cards. He's not going to agree with, some things that are demands of the progressive caucus, but he is also going to agree with many of the things that they want. So I'd be watching him, uh, because the House is the House, and I think for the most part they're going to accept anything that the Senate can put together. So watch Joe Manchin.
Okay. Well, sounds good. Well, I guess we'll have to keep the conversation going as well, right?
Thank you, Damien. This is very good. Appreciate you.